Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics back with the Rowan Patchwork Block of the Month. Now we'll be going over Block 2 and it's Block Mate, Block 8. Very straightforward. We have some squares, some half square triangles, and this looks complicated, but it's not. I can't wait to talk you through that. And of course, again, just a beautiful floral square right in the middle. Half square triangles, probably one of the earliest things that I learned as a early quilter when I was trying to figure out how this all worked. I'll give you two approaches to that. Just like we did before, of course, in actually the hourglass. Remember when we sewed half square triangles, two of them, press those seams open, place them right side together, and drew another line. That's where we got the hourglass box. Same concept, just smaller here. I drew the line on either side of my guide here because I surely like that. Like I said, I'm more accurate sewing on a line than trying to find a 1/4 inch away from the line. Or draw the line and sew that. However you want to do that. We'll go ahead now and cut those apart. And my inclination would be to press to the dark. It looks like we chose to press that one open. Again, I think the goal here is to try this to get our blocks to lay as flat as possible. I know our long arm quilters love that when our blocks lay nice and flat. They're very happy about that. They say it's a much simpler process when they don't have kind of these confluences of all these seams, and it sometimes creates breaking needles, breaking thread. Okay, press those open and very straightforward, of course, trim off your dog ears. We have our other fabrics coming into play. I mean, nothing complicated here about that. And you can see that we did do, it looks like a little bit of an interlocking seam here. Trim that away. It's a little easier to look at it, I think. One of the reasons I don't ever want to leave the kind of flaps in my blocks, you can. It's just, again, more of a confluence of fabric that is not doing you any favors whatsoever. So again, laying this out just like that, and right side together, pressing your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I think actually, as I look at this, we actually sewed this top to bottom. Very interesting. I think doesn't really necessarily matter, although I see why they do that now that I'm looking at this. It's always interesting when I design them and we make the quilt. Sometimes when we do video prep, we actually find that maybe there's a better approach. I'm just noticing something about these half square triangles. Notice how this footprint doesn't match. Why is that? Again, something I wasn't expecting to cover today, but I will. The rule of 7/8, you might have heard me talk about this before. These half square triangles in our block will finish at 2 inches. The rule of 7/8 means that you would add 7/8 of an inch to that, and you would cut your two fabrics that make up the half square triangle to 2 and 7/8. We like to add a full inch instead of the 7/8, so we have something to square up. That's why this is a little bit oversized from 2.5. These were cut to 3 inches. Now with my 2.5 inch, this cutest little creative grid ruler ever made, I have a chance to square up on all 4 sides. It is a little bit of extra effort, but when you consider the amount of effort that we're putting into these quilts and that we expect these quilts to remain in our family or somebody's family for many, many generations to come, it's worth it. Once we have that all squared up, now when I place these right side together, beautiful. They click right together perfectly. And you can see why we pressed here. Let me just go sew this. You can see why we did that is because the seam wants to go that direction. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Let me sew this. So as I open this up, you can see pressing back toward here, I would now have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers over here and one over here. That doesn't even make sense. That is such an imbalance of seam allowances, certainly not helping our block lie flat at all. That's why we pressed this direction here. Right, and that's the upper portion. Of course, you would do the same thing on this upper, on the right half, right side together, press toward here, and then you'll join the two halves and press your seam open. Okay, we're going to be moving on to the kind of that north, south, east, west part of our block. It looks complicated, it's not. There's a seam right here. You have two basically hemispheres, and it's simple, easy peasy. Just a rectangle, 2 squares for each half. Where they're oriented, here, you're going to draw the line corner to corner. So on the line, remember before we've been sewing a 1/4 inch away, not this time. So on the line, press to the outside and trim. For our bottom portion again, so they're basically looking like this, right? Pressing toward, well, the outside for one half and the inside for the other. And the reason being, in fact, let me just bring that out to you so you kind of see what we're doing. I'm trying to save us a little bit of time because I do want to talk to you about your other option with the half square triangles that I didn't touch on, but I want to be able to go back to that. This is just called stitch and flip, right? Draw the line, sew on that and flip. If you're going to be doing this side, of course, you'd be flipping that and on the turning that and sewing on the other side. I almost always on stitch and flip just press away from that. That's my habit. If I do that, however, I won't have interlocking seams. So for that reason, on the back of our shapes, I want to point out to you, and it doesn't matter which half is pressed to the outside and which half is pressed to the inside. Just make sure they are opposites. What that's going to do for you is when you place them right side together, you will now have interlocking seams. You see that? If I pressed everything just away, so when I sewed here and I press everything to the outside, if I did that with everything, all of these seams would be on the same side, and I'd have a very lopsided and not very flat lying block. So you'll want to very much be focusing on that confluence, pinning right along that seam. And similarly here, get everything lined up, seams are opposite. And we'll pin and take this to the machine. And let's have a look. Looks beautiful. And press your seam open. That makes sense, right? We want to evenly distribute that bulk. That's how you're going to make those, again, that north, south, east, and west. Your 4 corners, very straightforward. In the example I showed you, I'd already had that Creative Grid tool where I drawn the line and created my half square triangles that way. The other option is using star singles. You may have seen me do this before. Star singles are basically where you are able to sew on paper and tear away. The precision and speed is fantastic. One sheet with your 2 fabrics, and in this instance, of course, I'd have my kind of cream and my dark brown, right side together, makes 8 half square triangles. So for this particular block, I would use 1 full sheet and it would get me 8 of mine. And that step you saw me of squaring that up is not necessary because with star singles, Everything comes out exactly as it should be. Let me bring out what I've prepared for you. 2 fabrics right side together, again the cream and the dark brown. We like to upsize our fabric. The paper tells you what size to cut your fabrics to. In this instance, they're saying cut 6 inches. We like to make sure our fabric is at least the size of the paper so we can see it. We want to make sure that paper is on top of that fabric and not canted off to the side, and maybe you miss it as you're sewing. You're going to be sewing on your dash lines with a much shortened stitch length, maybe even a 1.5, and then cutting on the solid lines. We've already done that ahead of time. You can see that from above, but I wanted to just point out that those dark circles are where, if you have a needle down function in your machine, that's where you're going to pivot. So in this instance, number 1, I'm just going to start sewing right here on a shortened stitch length on my line, my dash line, stop, needle down, pivot, and move in this direction, and continue all the way around, and you can see we just sewed off. Once that's done, now the cutting part begins. I just want to show you a section of this so you can see how the star singles function. You'll always buy the size of the finished half square triangle you're going for. Not what it will be unfinished, but what the finished size will be. We know that these half square triangles finish at 2, so you'll be buying the 2-inch star singles. These come in a variety of sizes. So if you're doing another project with a lot of half square triangles or pinwheels, this is a great option for you. 8 at a time, beautifully, so precise, and you don't have to square up. I'm just going to cut one away for now and show it to you. The shortened stitch length also helps perforate your paper, so when you do remove your paper, it just comes off cleanly. If you've got kids that like to help out, want to be part of your project, maybe that's a great project for them, just to be able to tear the paper away. They feel like they're involved, and having a shorter stitch length will help put more stability in your half square triangles. So even when that half square triangle paper is being tugged at, your block will be stable and secure. Let's do a measurement check on that. And we are right on the money at 2.5. I do not have to square up. I'm here to tell you that of all the notions that I use star singles for half square triangles and pinwheels, not most of the time, every single time. And I use other tools, of course, from Creative Grid and others that I have found increase my accuracy and my speed. Okay. However you decide to make your half square triangles, now you're ready to go into your final assembly. There's a lot going on in this block. Basically, as you're sewing your rows together, just press all your seams open. And then, of course, with final assembly, all seams open again to help the block lie as flat as possible. We are clicking right along. I will be back with you next month as we move on to our block 3. It looks like we've got a fun new block here. This is just some 4-patch, but we'll still touch on that. And I'll see you next month for the Rowan Patchwork Block of the Month.